Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm privileged to welcome a very, very senior and accomplished professional from the world of education, Professor Raj R. Rao. Professor Rao, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ashutosh. Glad to be here.
Thank you. Professor Rao is a professor of biomedical engineering at the College of Engineering, University of Arkansas, Fayetteville. He's an elected fellow of the American Institute for Medical and Biological Engineering and an elected fellow of the Biomedical Engineering Society. He also currently serves as the president of the Institute of Biological Engineering, an organization devoted to advancing biology-inspired engineering. Professor Rao has contributed to 60-plus journal articles, book chapters, and conference proceedings, 100-plus conference abstracts, and 80-plus invited lectures. Wow, what an amazing journey you've had. So, Raj, before we get into biomedical engineering, tell me about your journey in brief.
Oh, okay. Again, thank you, Ashutosh, for having me and for this conversation today. So I'm originally from India. So I grew up in the southern part of India. My parents were in the banking sector. So we were in the upper middle class, but more importantly, we were constantly, provided opportunities to increase awareness of the world, increase awareness of the importance of science education. I still recall going to science fairs as kids and, showing off small designs of volcanoes or circuits, things like that. So it was a fun journey. So my next part of the journey took me to the northern part of India, so where I was privileged to earn a dual degree in biology and chemical engineering at the Birla Institute of Technology and Sciences in Pilani. So after spending 24 years of my life in India, I moved to the US in 1994, and I've been here for close to 29 years now.
Wow.
So I look at myself as a product of the education systems of two countries, India and the US, that are intertwined in so many ways. India is, of course, the world's largest modern democracy. The US is the world's oldest modern democracy, and has its own unique education system. So in the US, I earned a master's in biotechnology and subsequently earned a PhD in biological engineering. And then, after some postdoctoral training, I started my life in the academic sector in 2005, and I've been there since. So integrating research and education is one of my passions, and that's part of my journey so far.
Amazing, amazing. So I've got to make one other connection with you, and that is, since you mentioned BITS Pilani, my father was the second batch of BITS Pilani, and my younger brother was also from BITS Pilani.
Wonderful.
So, but small world, So let's talk biomedical engineering. For my viewers and listeners, Raj, tell me, what is biomedical engineering?
Right. So it's a relatively young field in the sense when you compare it to the traditional engineering disciplines, right? So as we know, the world of medicine is changing rapidly. Okay, and in the past 50 years, we have had new treatments and diagnostic tools that have been developed and tested every day. Okay. So many breakthroughs in medicine result from a combination of engineering and traditional science disciplines. So in many ways, the biomedical engineering discipline field takes advantage of of engineering approaches, problem-solving approaches, to better understanding of biological systems that can then be used to develop treatments and diagnostics that can contribute to human health. So that in a nutshell is what biomedical engineering is all about.
Interesting. And how does biomedical engineering intersect with other fields like medicine, biology, and computer science? And what are some of the challenges of working at these intersections?
Right. So biomedical engineering in itself is a highly interdisciplinary field. Okay. So just for as an example, because I'm in the education sector, just wanted to give you a flavor for some of the courses our students take. So as part of the core courses that our students take, some examples are biomechanics, another related to biomedical signals and systems, bioinstrumentation, biomaterials, biomolecular engineering. So as the names itself suggests, right, these rely on principles and theories from other traditional engineering disciplines, like, say, for example, biomechanics relies on principles from mechanical engineering, biomolecular engineering to a certain extent from chemical engineering, biomedical instrumentation relies from electrical engineering, so to say. So in many ways, our students are really provided an opportunity to take aspects from different traditional engineering disciplines, but more importantly, focus on how those can be used to address human health concerns. And that in itself allows them to then learn from other disciplines as well. So you specifically asked about the intersection of different disciplines coming together. So biomedical engineering is a perfect example of that.
Correct.
And challenges really don't exist because this really provides, so innovation in many ways is at the intersection of different disciplines, and biomedical engineering is uniquely positioned to take advantage of that.
Fascinating. And if it's not confidential, is it possible to talk a little bit about some of the exciting research projects that are going on that you are involved with?
Oh, nothing is confidential. Again, being in a public university, it is our responsibility to talk about what we do.
Okay.
And yeah, so I think it's I'm excited to talk about that. Again, a lot of it has been published as well. But of course, some of what we do, we don't talk about it till it's published.
Sure.
because the nature of the research itself.
Absolutely.
So personally, what I've been doing for many, many years is in the broad area of cellular and molecular engineering. So the field that I work in is in stem cell engineering. That is ushering a new era of a medicine. It's called regenerative medicine. So it can also be called as tissue engineering. So what we do in our labs is really figure out ways to to recreate cells or tissues in a dish. And so what does it allow us to do? So we take advantage of the information that cells themselves provide, but then create those in a dish, and then potentially use them for putting them back into patients later. So that is, in a nutshell, the area of regenerative medicine. So stem cells are master cells within our body that can form any cell type in the human body. The human body has got close to 220 different cell types. Think about that. That's just thinking about it is fantastic, and they all come together to create this functional entity, so to say, right? And so I think starting with the stem cells, we now have opportunities to create many specialized cell types that some of those can be put together to form unique tissues or organs, and then potentially be used to repair or regenerate, either in disease scenarios or injury scenarios as well. So that is what I do in my lab over many years. But we do take advantage of information from different disciplines. So we spoke about intersection of disciplines. So for example, we use a lot of bioinformatics approaches to learn more about genes and proteins and signaling pathways, but more importantly, the intersection, the networks that are formed between these genes and proteins. And that allows us to then design cells also in vitro, design microenvironments in which the cells and tissues can reside in vitro as well. So we use a lot of inspiration from nature. So bio-inspired materials is one aspect of what we do as well. So I think there are so many different aspects that we do in the context of research in our labs, and this slowly pushes the boundaries of the science forward, contributes to new technologies, and of course trains the next generation of engineers and scientists. Yeah.
Absolutely. I'm fascinated that you're doing so much work on stem cells. I've been reading a little bit, but I need to read up much more, and then I'm going to request you for a separate conversation only on stem cells, but I need to educate myself a little bit to ask you intelligent questions. So my next question to you, Raj, is that one of the big challenges I have seen with a lot of research is how does one go and commercialize it? And I think that seems to be a big challenge in a lot of universities in the US, because
Right.
it's basically US universities which are doing a lot of research. I don't
Right.
see much research being done in India. I'd love
Right.
to get your thoughts.
Sure. No. So again, I think there's a lot of research actually that's being done in India as well, and in
Mhm.
so many ways. Every time I visit India, I visit many universities,
Mm.
and talking to the many of the faculty out there, you know, the entrepreneurial spirit is extremely high right now in India.
Correct.
And the US, of course, has been doing that for many, many years.
Mm.
So to answer specifically your question, how do you take something from what we do in the universities to the
Mm.
marketplace? So the universities in general, we are a research intensive university, as most
Mm.
universities in the US are, which means that part of our job is to conduct research, and of course to teach, and also to serve our communities in
Mm.
different ways.
Mm.
So the research can be classified in three different forms. You can have basic research, you can have
Mm.
applied research, or you can have translational research.
Correct.
Okay, so in many ways we do a bit of all three. Okay, now in terms of so anytime we find something that has potential for going to the marketplace,
Mm.
one of the first things we do in the university is file an invention disclosure.
Correct.
So then we have an entity within the university, which is called the Technology Ventures
Mm.
division, that literally reviews the whole document to
Mm.
see whether this idea or prototype or device or process has potential
Mm.
for commercialization. So I also sit on the university patent and copyright committee,
Mhm.
and part of our job is to actually evaluate these invention disclosures and evaluate their potential as well.
Mm.
And so once that evaluation is done, the next step is obviously to file a provisional patent, which the
Mm.
university offices, they do that on our behalf,
Mm.
and that provides us also the time to refine the technology, to add in more data, to ensure that the intellectual property is strong when
Mm.
we go to the next step of filing the full patent.
Mm.
Now, commercialization is a totally different ball game, right?
Correct.
A lot of what we do is obviously research,
Mm.
but so that requires us to then bring together teams with people with different perspectives, folks with business knowledge.
Mm.
But the nice thing about existing opportunities, we have funding opportunities that allow us to get funding to evaluate the potential of the technology. So National
Mm.
Science Foundation has run a program called the ICORE program, which allows us to get seed funding to
Mm.
do customer discovery. So
Mhm.
we are specifically asked to evaluate the potential of the technology and talk to customers,
Mm.
stakeholders in the process. And that allows us very early on in the process to even figure out, is this something worth commercialization,
Mm.
taking it to the market?
Mm.
And so I think that's the first step. And then we have mechanisms in place to create startups.
Mm.
So I think we really encourage our students to do
Mm.
a fair bit of that as well,
Mm.
to become entrepreneurs, to be
Correct.
job creators rather than job seekers. Yeah.
Mm. Mm. Very interesting. And my next question relates to some of the ethical considerations that of biomedical engineering, which are in areas like privacy, consent, and potential harm to patients, with the goal of improving healthcare outcomes and advancing scientific knowledge. What are your thoughts on this particular subject?
Yeah, that's a very, very important question. So as I mentioned before, the field of biomedical engineering is very unique,
Mm.
okay, as an engineering discipline in itself,
Mm.
because it's humans doing research to promote human health or
Mm.
to better human health, right?
Correct.
So there are a lot of different factors and variables that we have to take into consideration when we are doing like human-centered design, for
Mm.
example.
Mm.
Ethics is an important topic that we touch upon in our
Mm.
courses a lot.
Mm.
So again, personally, in my own field, stem cell engineering, okay, so I started work with human embryonic stem cells many, many years back,
Mm.
and there were a lot of questions raised about what we did and
Mm.
how we did it, and so we had to constantly keep asking ourselves questions
Mm.
about, is it the right thing to do? But the important thing to note is that a lot of what we do, they from a research standpoint, we operate under very specific guidelines set
Correct.
forth by many federal agencies.
Mm.
Anything that we do is evaluated by peers. So we have committees within our university that first look at our projects and say, okay, these are ethically sound projects, be it either animal research or human subjects research, and only then we are allowed to move forward with the project. So even when we get funding from federal agencies, they first ask the question: has this been reviewed by your committees? And only then they will release funds. So there's a lot of checks and balances in place to ensure that whatever we do from a research standpoint is ethically sound, based on societal needs and based on policies and procedures in place, so that we don't make the mistakes of the past. So we all know that a lot happened in the 20th century in the context of how humans treated each other, in many bad ways, so to say, even in biomedical research. And so I think in many ways, ethics is something that's extremely important. And again, even when we go into the marketplace, privacy, you spoke about privacy.
Correct.
That's something that's extremely important moving forward as well. We have to ensure that patient rights are protected, patient privacy is protected in the context of any data that's even generated from devices that might be monitoring patients' health. So I think that's something that is an extremely important topic that needs to be taken into consideration.
And do you see a lot of collaboration happening between researchers across the US in these areas?
Oh, yes, definitely. So, I think the reality is that science cannot progress anymore by just one individual doing their own thing in their labs, things like that. Correct. So we extensively rely on collaborations. It doesn't have to be just within our own universities. I have collaborations with other researchers in the US, some in other parts of the world. In fact, I have collaborations right now in India and Panama.
Okay.
But that's more focused in the education space.
Right.
In fact, we bring students and faculty together in the context of a course that's focused on biomedical innovations for global impact. And that's an interesting experiment in itself in so many ways, where we teach our students on identifying problems that are common across the world, and so then figuring out ways to design innovative solutions that can have broad impact. And so low cost, efficient solutions that can have broad impact. So they learn a lot from each other on what are the common problems that exist and what are the common solutions that can be generated as well. So both from a research standpoint, we have collaborations. From an education standpoint as well, we have collaborations. Yes.
Very interesting. And is it possible for you to give an example or a couple of examples of how some of the work that you have done has actually had a positive impact on patients?
Oh, that's a good question. So basically a lot of what I do personally is still basic and applied research. I've of course filed a few invention disclosures and some of which are moving along, but it takes a bit of time to get something from sort of the bench to the bedside, so to say. So I don't delve into creating devices. A lot of what I do is at cells, and so, but the field of tissue engineering is still relatively young. But a lot of companies that are in the area of regenerative medicine, but it is a new era of medicine because it's going to be personalized medicine in so many ways. And so I think we have unique opportunities where we are creating unique types of cells that can contribute to specific disease scenarios, that can either impact the cardiovascular system or the nervous system. So it's still very early in the process in terms of what I do directly impacting patients, but a lot of other researchers across the world have already taken significant steps forward to take it to the marketplace. There's a lot of clinical trials that are going on, in fact, which takes a bit of time, right? And so I think there are a lot of unique opportunities that we are looking at from a futuristic standpoint as well. Yeah,
fascinating. I have time for two more questions. My next question is on medical devices, and I've seen for forever there have been 4 basic medical devices available. The blood pressure monitor, the glucometer, the weighing scale, and the thermometer. And yesterday I was speaking to someone in the US, and she has invented something which is now able to talk, able to tell you what are the allergens available in the air. Someone is talking about a finger ring. I wanted to get your perspective on how is the science of biomedical engineering actually delivering so many more, as you said, from the lab to the bedside devices, which are now coming into actual use for each one of us as human beings.
Right. I think that's a very, very important question. So again, so the fact is that, medicine is changing. The way medicine is operating has changed drastically over the years, right? It's no longer a scenario where we have to go into the clinic all the time to evaluate our health, to even get treatment sometimes, right? So I think the focus, as I mentioned, is personalized medicine. So one of the things that we have to think about is that the human population is pretty diverse, right? And many treatments that have been developed over the years do not really help the majority of the population. Many of the therapies that have been developed are useful to just specific populations. That's primarily because of the fact that many of the clinical trials have not really brought in diverse sectors of the population. So one of the things that we're looking at is how do we train the next generation, which is already happening in many ways, to create low cost, efficient solutions that will have broad impact. Okay, which means one of the things that we need to think about is figuring out ways to develop devices that's not like a one size fits all solution. How do I develop something that you can use in your setting? I can use it in my setting as well, but there are a lot of different variations in the environmental variables itself.
Absolutely.
But that has to be taken into consideration in the design process. And so, now we have a lot of smart technology, so to say, right? Wherein we can, smartphones, of course, taken over our lives in so many ways. What can we do? How can we use that to monitor our health? How can we use that to improve our connections with the clinicians as well? So a lot of that is, so in many ways, it's empowering ourselves, empowering patients to take better care of themselves. And so I think there's a lot that's happening that's going to move towards, devices that we can start using in our homes. But of course, there are going to be some devices that we have to go to the clinic to get evaluated.
Correct. And my last question to you, Raj, and this is for the thousands of people who will listen to our conversation. When I look at your journey, 2 decades in India, in some of the top institutes, and then moved to the US, re-educated yourself, studied, done exceedingly well. What would you say are 3 lessons you would want our viewers and listeners to take away from your life's journey?
Wow, that's a very interesting question. So again, I look at myself as a lifelong learner, so it's still it's still an ongoing process. So I think one of the most important things is that one has to be curious, right? Curious about what's happening in the world. What are the new technologies that are being generated, and ask questions about the pros and cons of each technology. That's important. Now, biomedical engineering, biomedical research is moving at a very, very fast pace. And one of the things that we need to also ask is, what are the societal needs? Okay, we need to be looking at what are the real healthcare needs that impact our societies. Okay, in fact, a lot of healthcare solutions still continue to be benefiting just a few in our societies. So we have to figure out ways to develop low-cost solutions that reach the broader population. So in fact, last year I had an opportunity to collaborate with an organization called Physicians for Peace that actually goes out to different countries and train doctors, and through them we got problem statements from Malawi, Africa. So our students were able to tackle, sitting in Fayetteville, and in Panama and in India to tackle a problem that was happening in Africa.
Amazing.
And that is a fantastic experience. So, and I think we need to do more of that. We need to figure out ways to ensure that solutions we develop reach the broader population.
Correct.
So, and again, I think, one of the things that I also tell in the context of, for the next generation is that be open to any opportunity. Check out opportunities, see, because it's part of the learning process.
Correct.
You're always going to learn something by checking out something. So I think in some ways, my background and training has always been at the intersection of disciplines, and I like being at the intersection of disciplines because it allows me to think in two different ways sometimes. So I think that's something that sort of a take-home message that I.
Fascinating. Yeah. And on that note, Raj, and your amazing lessons, be curious, always be looking for what is happening and ask questions. Second, you said also was that keep on exploring and figuring out what our societal needs and work towards developing low-cost solutions that benefit the masses of the world who may not necessarily be able to afford what may be available currently. And the third one, which is so powerful, be open to any opportunity. Thank you, Raj, for speaking to me about your incredible journey. Thank you for talking about biomedical engineering. I think I learned so many new things from you today on biomedical engineering. Thank you also for talking to me about the process that can be followed to take so much of the research to the marketplace. I do have one point that I need to come back to you for another conversation sometime, which fascinates me, which is stem cells, but that's for another day. Thank you for speaking to me, and good luck to you.
Pleasure chatting with you, Ashutosh. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.